Alright, kia ora koutou, it's Akan here, and I've had a few people ask me to do more stuff about how I process photos, how I try to make my shots look the way they do, and so I thought I'd start with a super quick demonstration from my computer on how I stitch together multiple astro shots. So I'm going to show you how I take some photos that I've taken out in the field and try and stitch them together in a program that I've been using for a while now called PTGui. Some people call it PTGui. I don't know if I like calling it PTGui. I'm going to call it PTGui. And so we'll go over and I'll go through my process. I'm going to try and do this in real time. This should be super quick, but hopefully you'll understand some of the major characteristics associated with shooting astro and then stitching it together to make a panorama. So let's go over and take a look. So as you can see, I have got 4 files here and I am using the raw files. I am not going to be using JPEGs or anything like that. Always shoot with raw, especially if you're doing astro work. Now, I haven't converted these to DNG. You can convert them to DNG to make them more portable, but PTGui actually will take a lot of raw files straight from your system. So I'm shooting on a Sony camera with these ones. I'm shooting on my trusty A7ii with a Sigma 24mm f1.4 DG art lens. Beautiful low light lens. It gives a good focal length as well for astro shots, but it's not wide enough to get the whole Milky Way, which is kind of what I was looking for on this occasion. So by taking 4 shots, and in this case I've taken a foreground shot, middle, and then a couple of Milky Way shots, I've been able to capture a lot more of the scene, and now I've got to stitch it all together. So let's take those 4 raw files straight away and drop them into PTGui. Let me make this a little bigger. Now already it's starting to process this, it's trying to find out. You can see it is already said this is a 24mm lens. It works out the focal length multiplier. If you're using a crop sensor, it will automatically take care of that, and it will try to make the best sort of match it can for the lens and the system you're using. First thing you do, once you've opened up PTGui, you've loaded your images like that, just drag and drop, is click Align Images. And it's going to do its best to try and line them up together. It's pretty quick, not too bad. If you were doing like 50 or 60 photos, it's not going to be this quick. But with only 4, it's not too bad. Now straight away, it comes up with a message, and this is a message I get a lot. And I don't know if it's because of my system, I don't know if it's because of my shooting, or whether it's just because we're dealing with low light and there's not many points that it can try and capture together and try and line up your shot and try to say, right, this is this, this is that. That it says there are not enough what we call control points to make sense of this image. Would you like to add control points now? And so we're going to click yes. And we go over to the next stage of stitching. And this is what we call the control points panels. And you can see my first photo is here. You've got the nice pier, which is quite cool at the front. Second photo is a little higher up. Third photo, more Milky Way, less foreground. Fourth photo, right up in the air, almost vertical at the apex on this one with my 24mm lens. And I want to get all these 1, 2, 3, 4 linked together. So let's start by looking at where this is linked. So if we look at picture number 0 in this case, and picture number 1, it's managed to automatically link these together. But there's a couple. Here's my orphaned image control points table. It says images 2 and 3 do not have any control points. Please try and add some yourself. And you can do this manually. And this is what makes it really powerful. I kind of like to work left to right. Everyone else might be different. So I'm going to put this image here. Now we know that 0 and 1 are already linked together. So I'm going to start at 1 and move to 2. 2 has no linkages at the moment. So we're going to manually add some in. So this is where I really wish I was a better astronomer than a photographer, and I can automatically go, well, there's that star, there's that nebula, I'll match those together. It's not so easy, but I can see a little bit of a purpley sort of thing here, and you can see the little cursor will zoom in. I'll click there on one image, and I'll try and match it up with the little purpley thing over here, so a little nebula here, and I'll match it up the best I can. Now a little bluey sort of nebula up here, you see a little collection of stars, and I will try to match it up with the little bluey sort of nebula, which matches up, I think that's the one over there, yep, over here. Now once you've got 2, it's going to start to try and make sense of the image on its own. So I'm going to pick another obvious shape, so there's a nice big star there, and it should automatically try and get close to it. Now it didn't quite get it exactly on, so we just move it. Again, just hold down the left mouse button, move it around, and it will find it. Let's see if we can find another. This one looks a little obvious down here, 2 stars close together. Let's click it there, and it'll get close. Click over here. What I try to do is have at least 4 or 5 control points on every combination of pictures. The more you have, the better it is. So you really want to try and get as many as possible and try and move it around the image. Try and get as many sort of clusters of control points from all over the image. If I only had them all from right in the center, it's not going to be a great stitch. So try to move it around a little bit and it'll get an idea of where all those pictures should line up together. So this is enough now. I've done this manually very quickly, but we've got number 3, which is orphaned as well. There's no stitching there. We've already done 2. We just manually attached picture number 1 to number 2. So now we'll pick picture number 2 to number 3. And again, find for some obvious sort of combinations. So again, I wish I was a better astronomer and I could zoom. I could see this a little easily, but it's not as easy for me. But I can see some nice nebulous sort of clouds up here. I'll start there, and that gives me a starting point. There's a nice bright star down here. I think that might be Antares, I'm not sure. And I'll match it up with that bright star. Now I've got 2, it's going to try and do its best to guess the third. So I can find something that's reasonably obvious but not too far out. That pink one there might be nice. I'll try and match it up. There we go. Oh, it's missed it a little bit. Matched up there. There's 2. Now the colors changed a little bit. It's a little pink on this one, a little bit blue on this one, but those were the same sort of match. Let's try this one over here. That should get me pretty close. There we go. Now the color changes is because I actually had it on automatic white balance rather than fixed white balance, and that means it's going to try and guess when you take the shot, it's going to try and guess what color it should be, and it's obviously just mixed up a little bit. Does make it a little bit more difficult, but not too bad. Anyway, so we've got what 6 control points on this one. Again, the more you do, the better it becomes, but I think 6, 7 will be enough. Let's put this one on because that's quite an obvious one to spot as well. Cool. So pictures number 0 and number 1 were automatically done. We've gone and then attached number 1 and number 2 manually, and number 2, number 3 manually. Go back to your Project Assistant tab. Right at the start, so we were at control points before, Project Assistant, and click Align Images again, and then let it process. We've given it a head start. We've told it this is what we're going to do. Let's see how it goes. Now this seems to have worked much better. We didn't get any warnings come up, and this panel turns up. This panel is called the Panorama Editor, and this is where we can start playing with it. Now for some reason, I don't know why, but on this picture, it's gone and flipped it 90 degrees clockwise. So we're going to need to flip it back to an orientation that makes sense rather than tilt our head. And then we can start playing with this as well as far as we go. Now when you're in the Panorama Editor, there's a few things you can do. If you hold down the left button and you move that object around, drag it around, it's going to change its projection. If you hold down the right hand button, it's going to rotate it. So let's hold down the right mouse button and rotate it. And then these axes on the right will help us to make sense of this. So let's maximize this. That's going to help us change that vertical field of view. This one here, horizontal field of view. It's going to help us to focus on what we want to do. Now let's see how we're looking. Now that looks a bit weird. It looks kind of okay on its side, not so good here. If you're really clever, and I'm not, you can just stitch it on its side like that, be done with it, and then rotate it in Photoshop. I kind of prefer to do it this way and try to make sense of it like this. Up the top, we've got a whole bunch of different icons. The key ones we're going to focus on here are these green ones up the top. Now these all show the different types of projections that we can have. Now if you can click it, it's going to change the way the image is seen. So that's rectilinear, this is cylindrical, this is equicentral, blah, blah, blah. And you've got all equitangular, I don't even know what that is. Circular fisheye, full frame fisheye, stereographic, downs, all of these different types of projections. And if you're smart, you know what they mean. I am not so smart, so what I tend to do is just look at the different ones and see which one feels nice. Go through Maketa, that's not too bad. Kind of stretches the stuff up the top, and I don't quite like that too much because I still want that stuff, the Milky Way up here, to be in the frame. We can even zoom this out so we can see it, but you can see it's really gone and stretched that part of the Milky Way a bit too much, so I'm going to ignore that one. The full frame fisheye seem to have worked quite nicely. Everything seems a bit flat and straight up, which is quite nice. Rectilinear looks quite nice when you've got simple panoramas. In this case, it's kind of messed it up a bit, but it's all quite flat. I kind of like that really straight edge on the pier there. It's a bit kind of skew-iffy, it's kind of a bit weird in places, but it's not the worst. Looking through all of these earlier, I kind of like the full frame fisheye in this case, and it didn't seem too bad. So let me just zoom out a little bit. Right click to rotate, left click to move it around. Let me just straighten it up again. Let's try and get that horizon flat on one of these guidelines here as best we can. Use the vertical field of view. And that's not looking too bad. Now, I'm going to crop this anyway once I get into my other editing software like Photoshop or Lightroom, whatever you use, but that's not looking too bad at the moment. But I kind of want to have a closer view. So you can click on this one up here, which is Show in Viewer, and it will help produce a draft stitch. You can zoom in a little bit, look at it all and say, yeah, that horizon looks flat, that's good. Milky Way looks like it's going in a nice straight line. That pier kind of looks a bit skew-iffy, but no, it's not too bad. Maybe it's a little bit distorted there. We might need to fix it up later. Not too bad. Now, there's going to be times when maybe you only want images from certain photos to appear in your stitch, and you want others to be ignored. Now, one thing I really like about this, up the top, these red ones have different ways you can see how the stitch works. So this one where it says show seams is probably my favorite, where if you click on that, it'll show, right, this bit of the picture down here is image 0, this one's image 1, 2, and 3. Remember, 2 and 3 weren't stitched before, so if we'd only stuck with 1 and 0, we would have only got this frame here. We've added these in, makes the picture much more interesting. Now, when I took this photo, I actually changed the focus so that the focus on stitch 0, that picture number 0, was quite in focus on the foreground, and then 1, 2, and 3 were more focused on the distance. And that way that we've got this range of depth of field without messing around too much with the stuff in the foreground being out of focus because of the depth of field being so shallow. So what I want to do, I want to make sure that foreground is mainly picture 0. And then the background up here, mainly pictures 2 and 3, which are definitely, I know, focused on the stars. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go back to my editor that we have here, and next to source images, here we can change the images if you want. Like if you don't like 0 and you want to replace it with another one, you can. There's a tab called Mask. And in Mask, we can go and decide which part of each picture definitely gets used or definitely doesn't get used. So let me minimize this a little bit. And let's bring up our editor here, and I'll minimize this so we can go side by side, and this is going to make it easier for you to see. The red paint button down here will say we definitely do not want this part of the picture in our stitch. The green, we definitely want it. Now I know the pier and the water was in focus in this bottom one because I had focused on the foreground. So I'm going to paint over here and say I definitely want all of this. Now you can manually paint like this. It takes a little bit of while. You can make that bigger so it gets a little quicker. The other thing you can do is a paint bucket tool, and you can fill in gaps. Now you might have been watching over here on the right that as I was painting stuff in, it was making this part bigger. It was removing picture number 1, making picture number 0 far more prominent. If I've made a mistake, I can go and take some stuff out, put it back in. Perfect. Now I definitely want that pier, that jetty, in from picture 0. Picture number 1, I actually want all the sky to be from picture number 2. I know that was focused on the background, so I'm going to start with a red line to say do not use this on picture 1. Get rid of all that. So now picture 1 is almost nothing is being used there, but that's okay. When you're doing Astro, you want to have a lot of overlap so that if you do make a mistake or if there's too much distortion from one image, you can eliminate it. So I've actually gone and eliminated a lot of picture number 1 from this, but 2, 0 are compensating for it. Now, when you start mucking around and saying, I definitely want this section from picture 1, this section from picture 0, you'll see. So if I go to green here and try to paint in the jetty, when I've already said that's where picture number 1 is, you can see it kind of gets a little confused over here. And it says, wait, you're trying to get it from picture 1 and picture 0. This is a bit funky. Let's not do that. So I'm just going to go Control Z, get rid of that. All right, so I've got picture 0, jetty. Picture 1, I don't want the stars. I want them to come primarily from picture number 2. 2, 3, I don't really need to do too much of this. That stitch seemed to have worked quite well. Let's get rid of the seams, go back to this one, which shows the full blend. And again, it's not looking too bad. This is kind of what I wanted. Not bad. Final step, and this is with PTGui. There is one thing that you can get with the premium version, which you've got to pay a little extra for, is this automatic exposure and color adjustment. And this will just help your blend between the seams a little bit more accurately, and it help it feel like it's not a forced or a really rough blend between the two. So with the settings, you can start changing various things, like you can get rid of the vignetting between the different pictures. You can optimize the exposure, so if for some reason one is overexposed, one is underexposed, you can balance those out. White balance, I talked about how I used automatic white balance. I'm definitely going to need to fix that up, and it can do that all in here. You can choose which images it gets applied to as well. I'm going to do it to all of them. So I'm going to say optimize exposure only if necessary. I didn't actually change the settings between shots. They all use the same shots, so I don't think it's that necessary. So if it feels it's necessary, it's going to do that. Or optimize white balance, definitely. So I'm going to enable that. And optimize flare, response, camera response curve, again, not necessary in this case. There's plenty of information from PTGui as to what those are and why you have them. So I'm going to click OK, and it's go, hey, you've changed the settings. Would you like to optimize it now? So yes, I'd like to optimize it. And you can see there, it kind of just brightened it up a little bit. Let me go reset. You'll see it change back. That vignetting is far more aggressive. When I go optimize, smooth down a much more. Now that already feels like a cleaner image. Again, we can do a preview. So you can either do a preview here, open in default JPEG viewer. That's one way of doing it. The other way, up the top here, there's a preview function. You can decide how big you want it. Open it. It's going to stitch it and just do a very low res stitch for you so you can look at it in a little bit more detail. This one takes the guidelines away. Is there anything obvious? And sometimes, you know, if I'm doing a complex stitch, you'll see a line through here or a line through there or something like that. I've messed it up. Let me go back and let me mask that out. Use this picture rather than this picture. So this is a nice low-res image just to get a feel for the structure. That looks okay. The final step, create your panorama. And there's various ways that you can create your panorama. So I'm using a full-frame camera, using 4 images. It's always going to be quite large, the number of pixels, even on a 24 megapixel camera like my A7ii is. So we've got, at the moment, it says the width is 12,000 by 13,000. That's not the width of the picture, that's the width of the whole canvas here. So the actual picture width is probably about 9,000 by about 6,000 or something like that. That's still a big picture. You can set the optimum size. I don't actually know what that does. I've never seen a huge difference between the optimum size. So you can set whatever size you want. I wouldn't increase it though. So if it's at 12,000, don't bump it up to 24,000. All you're doing is artificially increasing the picture. It's not going to help. Again, if you're going to edit this, and with Astro shots, always edit them after the fact. Export it into either Photoshop or TIFF format. If you have Photoshop, that's the best way to do it. And then go create panorama. If you're doing a bunch of them, or you want to do this overnight, like if you've got 400 pictures that you're trying to stitch together, you might want to batch it later and do it overnight. Perfectly fine. So I'm just going to click create panorama. One of the things I love about PTGui as well, it will use your video card to help render that much quicker than using your CPU or RAM alone. So creating panorama, we've got 4 raw files being stitched here, and it's reasonably fast. Again, I think the worst stitch I've ever done, worst as in most aggressive, most pictures, was like 60 pictures that I stitched together using my 55mm lens of the Milky Way. Took a long time to manually put in those control points because it missed a few, but also it just took a long time to render afterwards. And you had this image that was like, you know, 600,000 pixels or something stupid like that. It's a ridiculous size. Go back to where you had your panorama, your PSD file saved, and double click that. We'll open it up and pull Photoshop across, and there is our image. Pretty much how we had it before. Let me zoom in a little bit, and you can see it feels like the image I had before. That's the projection I wanted. I can then crop it to the sort of framing I want. Let's see what looks nice. That's not too bad. I might include a little bit more information. You know, I mean, I'm not a huge stickler for the rule of thirds, to be honest, so I don't care, but we'll try and keep the bottom third foreground, middle third the core, top third more sky. Crop that down. Let me see what the size of this image is. So image size, yeah, so once we've cropped it down, 7,344 pixels high, 4896 wide. That's still a pretty decent size file. When you think that most 24 megapixel cameras will have 6,000 by 4,000, that's not a bad size image. Now, if I tried to do that in a single image, it wouldn't actually have picked up all that stuff together, but that's not too bad. And then now you can edit it as you want, and it's really up to you how you edit it. I will do a video later on how I edit my photos, so I'm not going to waste your time here. Anyway, that's how I've used PTGui for this this shot in particular. Hopefully it's been useful. Hopefully you enjoyed it. There are other stitching softwares out there that you can use. Hugin or Hugin, Hugin, is an excellent, powerful, free software. It's something that I would really recommend. It's not as user-friendly as some of the other stitching software I've seen, but it's really powerful. You can do more of those control point things as well. And the other one that I recommend is MSICE, Microsoft Image Composite Editor. Really powerful one. I haven't been able to find a way of adding in manual control points, so if the computer can't automatically stitch those different pictures together, it's not going to be able to do it. You're not going to be able to do it manually, but again, a free product, really, really good for most simple panoramas. Thanks for watching. Hopefully it was useful. Hopefully you learned something, and I'll catch you next time.